Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of Future Fuzz, the digital marketing podcast with a B2B focus. Today, our guest is a CEO and founder and all-round growth architect with a track record that includes 2 successful company exits and 1 public listing. It's Stephen Upstone from LoopMe. With deep roots in advertising and data-driven marketing software, he has led venture-backed tech companies at the bleeding edge of mobile and online innovation. Stephen has been very early in both AI and mobile video. Let's explore what he has learned as a stalwart of mobile advertising. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Justin.
Let's dive straight in. You did a recent interview at Cannes where you said the most important thing for clients right now is how campaigns are performing. So 90% of clients are just caring about the results, whereas there might be 10% that are looking to dive into the weeds of how a campaign is set up. Why do you think that is? What's their motivation?
I think that was tied into, how many clients want to really understand AI at deep level versus focus on results. And we're working in the area of brand advertising performance, and that's sort of stuff that classically used to be on television. So there are lots of ways that you can measure the effectiveness of that brand advertising, and that's what they're usually leaning into, rather than having to understand exactly what's happening differently under the hood. The bigger companies, often the very, very big tech companies, large agency groups, do have teams of data scientists who want to connect with our data scientists and really understand that differentiation as well. And so we can serve both customer groups, but ultimately it's the results that clients are really looking for as they try to move brand advertising, everything that used to work really well on linear television, into new channels like mobile and start to try and get much better performance out of it.
I think one of also the interesting statements you've made as well is the potential of having mobile video advertising being better than TV. How do you think that's going to come about?
Yeah, so if you look at the big shifts that have been happening in the market over the last 10 years, say, linear television has come down as almost half in terms of viewership over the last 10 years, and mobile usage has almost doubled over the last 10 years. So you've got these big sort of seismic shifts, and linear television used to be a fantastic way of building brands, the kind of emotional connection, sight, sound, and motion. And that is a very high bar to then achieve on the digital device. And to make that work within mobile devices where we're working, kind of full screen video with the sound on, 15 seconds is a great way that gets you quite a long way. But actually then optimizing that delivery, when and how to speak to people, which contexts to use, which data sets to use, is how you're then allowing that digital advertising performance to go by 2 to 5 times better results by building in that kind of AI measurement and technology. And that brings it up to the level of television or above that level. And that's what marketers need these days.
I think that's quite interesting because if you think about classic TV, is that someone's very passively watching a commercial break and they might go off and they might go and make a cup of tea and you won't know if they've really seen the ad, right? Whereas on mobile, you know that they're seeing that ad, right? And in many cases with, let's say, an interstitial, you can guarantee that they're seeing that ad on their screen and it's their very personal device. And something else as well is the click. In mobile video, are advertisers also really dependent on the click, or are they just happy for the ad to be seen?
Yeah, some are interested in clicks, others are looking at other actions. So what we're seeing is kind of redefining the market, and where we're working is around the mid funnel. And so if you think about a classic advertising funnel, the upper funnel is awareness, seeing the ad is based off reach and frequency. And you can add other things like brand safety and viewability and good kind of good media measurements. The bottom of the funnel is sale. Did somebody go in and actually purchase the product online or in a store? Mid funnel actions would be things like drive to store, did they fill out a survey where they said they became a considerer of that brand? Would you consider buying a new 4x4 or trying a new flavor of ice cream? Do you become a purchase intender? These are the kind of metrics that a lot of marketers have used to define the mid-funnel previously. And so you can now actually take those measurements and optimize those measurements in a campaign to get, kind of much better outcomes for the brands.
Interesting stuff. And how do you see the technology developing right now? So, you in the early days, you were already putting video into phones before the iPhone came out. So you've really seen it all. How do you see technological changes having an impact right now?
Yeah, we were really early in brand advertising. I think so, stitching together some of the first kind of ad experiences on the mobile devices around video. But actually, still today, a lot of advertising is delivered in quite old-fashioned ways. It seems extraordinary with all the talk about AI and new technologies. Most video advertising is done on reach and frequency, so how many customers have you reached or potential customers, and then how many of those how many times have you reached them and what cost have you done that on, with some other measurements as well. So, and that classic television advertising is using very broad audiences like young adults or main shopper or mum or main car buyer or dad, really old fashioned ideas that don't really get to the heart of who these actual potential shoppers are. And that leads to a massive amount of loss of efficiency, as you get lots of ads shown to people who just wouldn't ever purchase your product. And I think that's the kind of a big opportunity to more granularly understand the addressable market or the audience you can actually talk to, define that inside the advertising flow, and actually optimize towards something that's not just reach and frequency. That I think is the big opportunity in the future of brand advertising, is not just to fall back to the old-fashioned ways of working. When you then,
Sorry, I interrupted.
I was just going to say, when you then drill down, there's a lot of other ways that technologies are coming to bear at the next level down as well.
Just really curious, how many technology partners do you plug into there at LoopMe? So you talked about granularity, and I'm assuming that you're not providing all of that tech yourself, but do you have any, let's say, a list of tech partners that you say you've got to go to them for certain amounts of data, or you've got to go to them for location?
Yeah, so LoopMe has a full kind of end-to-end stack. So that we have a buying platform. We have our own standalone measurement and data collection platform that's actually running 300 million surveys annually, and that number's growing a lot as well. Those surveys can ask a simple question like, do you intend to purchase a Hyundai Kia or a 4x4 car or a certain flavor of ice cream, etc. So that can be used to define measurement, in the same way that Kantar would create brand lift measurement, but to do that in real time. And it can also define an audience. That's sat in the center of our platform. And then we also have connections into lots of external parties as well, where we connect to 30,000 different apps, for example. We also connect to television and to web devices. So we have a full end-to-end platform that allows you to go directly from advertiser into the end publisher. But we also connect to other SSPs for scale of advertising, to go beyond our kind of direct 30,000 connections into other areas of web or into CTV. We bring brand safety and viewability from people like Double Verify and Human into the platform as well, to make sure that what we have is measurable. And then we also can export our data or audiences, if you like, into other platforms like the Trade Desk. And we recently did a partnership with Axiom, where we can export our data into their platform, and they can actually then sell that data for us. So there's a lot of different connections in and out. And on the buy side, we deliver a lot of our value into DV360 or into the Trade Desk. So we're generally trying to be able to execute everything within the platform, but work very easily with tools that other marketers are relying on or very familiar with, both to kind of verify the effectiveness, but also to get into the next level of making it easy for us to work with and scale.
That's pretty powerful stuff. So I'm very curious about the surveying. So how many surveys did you say that you ran? It was in the millions, I think.
It's about 300 million a year. And one of the smart things we've been able to do, we don't run those in a panel. We run those as ad space. So you might be playing a game or in a utility app, or and you'd see a full screen ad that would say, do you intend to purchase product X? And that can be super specific. It could be, do you intend to watch this program on Amazon Prime? And then there's usually 7 questions in the survey. Three or so of them are saying your age and gender, and others are adding extra granularity. What kind of films do you like to see, or what's the most important thing about the car that you're going to buy? Is it about the price point or the safety, etc.? So taking that small set of questions, you get a very, very quick dip on who current customers are. And the interesting thing about that is it's always fresh. It's always, those questions are asked now, and it's always forward looking. Do you intend to purchase? So you think about events like tariffs coming along, shifts in the global economy, COVID, you've always got that fresh forward looking data set that you can build audiences off and also optimize delivery on. So it's a very powerful tool. And it's a lot lower cost than using a panel. And because of the scalability, you can start to do some other interesting things. So we also supply measurement to lots of other companies as well. People like Warner Discovery use as part of their upfront. It's just our measurements distributed now via the Amazon DSP as well. Lots of very big individual brands and agencies use our measurement tool separately. So one of the powerful things of by bringing the cost of collecting that data down by 10x, it means you can do local advertising. You can find B2B audiences. We're typically getting thousands of responses within a campaign flight rather than hundreds, which is what you'd got traditionally at the end of a campaign. That means you can start to do in-flight optimization and enable much better performance rather than waiting until a campaign's finished to say, oh, I missed the target this time, or oh, I did great, I wish I'd spent less or maybe more, depending on the results. So I think it's quite a big game changer in the measurement area that then powers a lot of our media delivery.
I think that's really interesting, and it seems to be the golden nugget is that you're able to do it at a lower rate, because I'm assuming you're able to get hold of inventory, that there must be a lot of it available, and then you're getting a quality answer in the form of a survey, which is seen as qualitative, but you're also doing that at scale. You're doing that at big numbers. And I think that's where a lot of companies struggle, right, is to get an answer from the consumer, but get the numbers as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think compared to a panel, which would be the ways of collecting data in the past, people who sign up to panels to get $5 or $10 a month, they're often older and less affluent, and so not always as interesting to advertisers. So it's actually a better quality audience, as well as having this big scale. It definitely helps solve measurement and audience generation, two of the big challenges in the market today.
You started really early in the world of AI, as long as 21 years ago. So tell us about that. Tell us about that story and the organization that you were working in. If I'm not mistaken, you actually sold that company.
Yes, I was on the board. I wasn't the founder then. It was a business called TouchClarity. And actually my chief data scientist who works for me today, Leonard Newnham, he worked with me back then. We sold that business to Adobe, and they still use some of the AI algorithms we created then in their test and target solution. So it was homepage optimization of people like MSN, AOL, all of the banks in the US and UK as well. And we essentially just learnt what someone looking for and made it easier to discover that online. And we did some cool things back then. I remember looking at what would be the impact of AI choosing which stories to promote to consumers rather than editors. And I think we got 365% better results from you letting the AI choose which stories than the editors got, and you measure everything against concurrent control groups. So that was a kind of very formative time for me. And I remember thinking, I'd worked in advertising previously and some time in venture capital as well. Advertising is still just driven on segments. It's this sort of old-fashioned idea of like, who is my audience? Let's go and define that audience. And there was very little real-time learning involved in the market. And I was very passionate to bring that into the kind of platform when we founded LoopMe, which was in 2012. And I think that's been a lot of our success, putting really authentic AI to work against problems where it hadn't been used before. And often those are patented solutions and very, very novel.
Future Fuzz is sponsored by SalesSource, B2B pipeline management and sales growth for your business.
There's quite a few memes going around at the moment where everyone's saying we want, like the CEO says, we want AI, and then they're showing, but when do you want it? And it's like, we want it now, and what do you want it for? Like, we don't know. So you've obviously seen that from the very, very early stages. Don't you think that some organizations are just jumping on the bandwagon and trying to slide it into their product offering wherever they can, and it doesn't really drive any value? Or do you think in the ad tech world, you think the majority of applications are pretty smart? What are your opinions on that?
I think it's still pretty early, actually, for real use of AI. And I think there are a lot of people who are jumping on bandwagons for very good reasons. But if you break AI into two different areas, basically you've got all the sort of computational or real-time predictive analytics, all the mathematical AI, where AI can in 1 second make a sort of 2 million calculations based on data points that it would take me years to try and do as an individual human.
Right.
And that creates a lot of incremental value. I think there are still a lot of even very, very big companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, that just have a single algorithm, for example, and just say, we've got an algorithm. In fact, when they change the algorithm, the share price can shift. And, for example, in that area, we've managed nearly 2,500 algorithms that are competing with each other. So every time any campaign is run, you're always replacing the current best performer with the new best performer. You're letting the data be provided to a number of algorithms at once and letting that to all happen automatically. So I think even just in basic computational side, there's a lot of opportunity for real differentiation. And you can see that within patents, and you can look at who people have employed, whether or not they have employed real data scientists or just analytics people. Then I think within the large language models and all this generative AI that people are looking at now, that's where we're so much earlier, and it's really exciting as to where it's going to go to. And I think that lots of people are rightly jumping on the bandwagon, but oftentimes the application is just easier tool sets to find, to find those segments that we were talking about earlier, and to search through data sets. So sort of better natural language search. But the promise there, in the same way that in a computer you could literally now calculate simultaneously in 1 second 2 million different computations.
Yeah.
Within generative, you're able to answer strategic questions by reading 10,000 books and novels and articles within a second and coming back with an answer. And that's pretty powerful. I think we're still just starting to understand the impact of that.
Yeah.
And I think we're just starting to put that now into creative. I was looking at some of the new creative tools that Google's bringing out as well to create creative and creative video.
Yeah.
I still think they're pretty early. I think often they don't crack it, but what they can produce is a lot more effective than, in terms of the time piece, but I think the quality is not quite there. So I think within these language models, there's going to be massive implications for strategy, for creative generation as well. And it's still a little early, but wow, it feels like a fast pace. For someone who remembers dial-up, that felt years to get next versions, whereas the pace at which this is changing, I mean, we've all done that thing of asking quite strategic questions to it, and it comes back pretty good, with oftentimes suggestions that the team that are looking at it haven't yet come up with or haven't thought about in that kind of logical, structured way. So I think that side of the kind of the language model stuff is really interesting and has massive bounds. And I think marketers need to really lean in and see what is possible. I was super early in mobile. And for many, many, many years, the time spent on mobile was massive, and the amount of budgets were tiny. And I think that the companies that leaned into mobile and redefined their businesses around mobile were incredibly successful on the back of that. And we're going to see some of those same shifts in AI. So, long-winded way of saying, I think that there are a lot of people who are jumping in, but I think I'd be more worried if you weren't jumping in now. And I think try to look at transformative, not just at how do I make my software look better to do a basic search function. How can you really transform the output of your business using these new AI services?
Yeah, to break it down, I've heard some interesting things. I mean, from a content perspective, I had a chat with Andy Crestodina from Orbit Media, and he made a decent point. He said, if there are marketers out there that are looking at content that's being produced, and they can ask the question, could ChatGPT or another LLM do a better job than you? And if the answer is yes, you need to rethink your content strategy on that part. That's quite powerful. And then also from Sam Bake from Veed, the VP of product there as well. He's like very excited about the opportunity. And you mentioned video there, like the technology from Google now, but other platforms as well, is that there's a lot of potential there, but it's a missing quality piece, I think you just said, which is an interesting point. But it's also very expensive, very, very expensive. And you run a lot of video ad. Do you see clients coming to you with more AI generated video, or you still feel as though
not yet?
Not yet.
For people, because the cost of actually giving a bad message in front of consumers by far outweighs the advantage of doing it. But there are lots of different costs that you have involved. So you have your creative director or your most senior creatives. Their jobs aren't in danger for a long time, but if you look at some of the things that we've all done in our careers, when I first started, I used to send faxes to move television spots. I mean, it sounds like another,
right,
doesn't it? That we used to then charge £1,000 to send out specs to get the ad placement into a magazine as well. So many things now digitized, and in that same creative production process now, with dynamic creatives, you're getting thousands of different creatives without anyone touching that. So even pre-AI, there's just a huge amount of automation that's happening that's benefiting us. And I think that leaning into some of those new AI processes will be important, but they'll need a great editor for a long time yet to pick great solutions. But some of the really good ideas might well be generated by AI. It certainly wouldn't surprise me, and it might all happen quicker than we think. In 5 years from now, how much would things have changed compared to today? Probably quite a lot.
It does certainly feel like the great ideas can come from it, and then a great producer or an editor can polish it off. I mean, we're not all crying that the fax machine has died away, are we?
No, not at all. I still can't write normal handwriting today. I still write in capital letters because no one could read my faxes all day.
No one could read your faxes, yeah. Well, for me, it was Friday afternoon on the sales floor that when the fax machine beeped, everyone would rush to the fax machine to see if their order came in and they hit their sales target. Those were the days. I always trust someone when they remember a fax machine, Stephen. It's definitely gone up in my books. Let's talk very briefly about the market. So at the time of recording, it's been a bumpy ride for some agencies, right? Some of the holdcos have had some big shifts. It's been a relatively challenging market for some organizations and not for others. Do you see any green shoots? Are you feeling confident for the next 6 to 12 months?
I think it feels like we're constantly being reset slightly backwards. If I think about what we've been through COVID and then cost of living crisis and wars and inflation, it's been pretty continual. I think someone said the other day, every year these days feels like at least 3 years in sort of how things used to be in terms of, oh Christ, this thing's come along now and really impacted us. So we were feeling pretty positive. The beginning of the year started very, very well. And as a business, we're still seeing great growth. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity for businesses that are kind of working in the interesting growth markets. So we've grown now 40% a year on top line for the last 7 years organically. And this year that should increase up to, maybe 60 to 80% because we acquired a large business last year. So we're seeing great momentum as a business. And then when you break it down and look at individual areas, tariffs have definitely taken some of the steam out of the market, especially connected to certain verticals in the US. There are some verticals that might benefit from that, but overall, advertising is often reduced when there are people, when people are uncertain. So I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that this will be a stellar year for the overall industry yet.
Right. Yeah.
I am seeing it will be a fantastic year for us. And I think, just we were talking about AI earlier and LoopMe seeing great progress now, but I think actually when you look at the ad tech businesses that are thriving at the moment, there's a lot of them, and they all seem to have this kind of AI at their heart as well. You have big companies like Mountain recently did its IPO very, very successfully. You have other businesses like Liftoff. Zeta has been on the market for a long time using AI to optimize a lot of first-party data they have there, and PII data. They've seen great growth as well. AppLoving, of course, and Liftoff in the app download space and user acquisition space are seeing great progress as well. And I think those companies are seeing that progress at the expense of businesses that aren't doing AI. So there are some ad tech companies that are more based on great creative or dry format or things like that. And those guys have been struggling to get to double-digit growth, finding it harder to get the profitability. So I think that whilst the market overall still remains uncertain, there's definitely great green shoots of growth of people who really invested a long time ago into AI. And now, especially within the ad tech ecosystem, are able to get to that kind of scale of customers and build some kind of a competitive moat that's hard for others to get to around the data products they have. So, I think it's a mixed story out there. I do think that there are loads of examples from the past about how important it is to not give up brand advertising during this time, and I think instinctively lots of CMOs and businesses have known that. But if you look at what happened in previous recessions, we've seen that actually keeping doing brand advertising tends to see sales increase by 17%, whereas cutting it back can see sales decrease by as much as 15%. I've seen other studies that have shown, by people like Nielsen, very big credible kind of studies over years that show that every percentage point that you lose during these kind of difficult times is much harder to build back than later. I think we've even done some press on this from our chief product officer Rob Cookieman and his team, he's an ex-Nielsen guy only today. So I think even in uncertain times, there's a lot of evidence that you need to keep going and you need to bet on yourself for the future and continue to invest.
Yeah, you definitely need to drive forward, and that's a really, really interesting stat to know about. That it's much harder to build it back when times are good again because you didn't invest and didn't hold strong when times were a bit challenging. Any exciting acquisitions for LoopMe in the future, do you think, or you've done one big acquisition and you're happy with that for now?
Yeah, so as I'd mentioned earlier, we're a sort of an end-to-end platform, and we see that mobile really is the future of brand advertising. And by acquiring Chartboost from Zynga, Chartboost was one of the original kind of OG Sequoia venture capital-backed companies, amazing, talented team, and 30,000 SDK integrations. So, really puts you in the kind of top of that area. So we were thrilled about getting that business on board, and it allows us to go fully end-to-end. I think other things that we're looking at for the future, we're really excited to build a big platform for the business. So looking at areas to bring more demand into the platform. Are there other kind of channels that we can add? So at the moment we're sat very much in mobile. We do work around connected television. We do work around web. Could we expand in those areas organically, or is there an opportunity to maybe acquire something in those areas? I think that we have a lot of our business is driven on great data, all those survey data points that we have, but we've also built the ability to measure in real time. And so putting in other data sets into the platform could also allow us to optimize on different areas, different outcomes, if you like, for marketers. So I think that that's interesting as well. Or bring in other unique areas or new channels. Should we consider moving more into social or YouTube or other areas? So I think there are a bunch of different things that we can do around that kind of core mission of bringing brand into the performance age, and we see that as a massive opportunity. I think in the US alone, we see $120 billion of market opportunity in the mid-funnel alone. And so we're definitely keen to kind of continue to look for ways to grow into that organically, and also looking at acquisitions in that area. I think we looked at 200 companies last year. We put 3 LOIs down and bought, very pleased to say, the best one, and that's going really well. And I'm really thrilled about the quality of the talent that we got out of that
Brilliant
as well.
Yeah.
Just fantastic team.
Exciting stuff, and maybe some podcasting or video podcasting in the mix as well.
In fact, I think that audio is a really interesting area. It's funny, my son is now 23. When I first started out in media is in 94, the first year that the first banner ad was served. And as he looks to his career, you know, the fact that everybody's wearing these now
all the time,
the huge growth in audio. My wife's a writer and, you know, in audio books as well. And the way that'll change the market, I think that's interesting. I think influencer marketing is a really, really interesting area as well.
Yeah.
For brands to develop and for content and creativity. And then, of course, AI. And I think the generative area of AI are all really, really big, exciting themes that will define my son's next 30 years of working, probably in around this same industry. So
you should do a podcast with him in 30 years' time, see how he's getting on.
That would be a great thing to do, or maybe one with him and others like him earlier now to see how they see the
right. That would be a disaster.
Create an amazing future, and yeah, you're in a really, really hot area of podcasting and with audio. It's a really exciting medium to be working in.
Stephen, it's been brilliant having you on the show today. Some real insights there. Very exciting for LoopMe now and in the future. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, I should say. And I'll definitely hit you up for a cup of coffee when I'm next in London. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, look forward to it. Thanks a lot, Justin.
Thanks for tuning in and making the choice to listen to this podcast. If you liked what you've heard today, please don't forget to subscribe.